60 Minutes, Rewind.
A lot of us who grew up on meat and potatoes used to say the reason the French cooked such strange things was that they couldn't afford decent food. Fish, we used to say, are for other fish to eat. Please pass the ketchup. We've been fascinated to watch the growth of gourmetry in America since World War II. Most newspapers now have a food and restaurant editor who reviews restaurants and recipes with as much passion and detail as he would movies. Probably the top man in the field is Craig Claiborne of the New York Times. If you're a food fan, chances are you have Craig Claiborne's New York Times cookbook in your kitchen. He and other members of the food establishment, like Julia Child and James Beard, don't always agree, except that good food and good cooking are two of the most important things in the world. We went to dinner with Craig to watch him hard at work. We chose Laurent, dinner for two, roughly $40, including cocktails and wine, which in a guide to New York restaurants puts it in the moderate to expensive class. Laurent turned out to be an excellent place to watch Craig Claiborne do his thing.
Thank you. If I began with escargot and skipped to soup, and then in this restaurant particularly, they have usually something a little bit different from the kind of routine menu you talked about in French restaurants. I have never eaten a pigeon in my life.
You haven't?
I have never eaten a pigeon in my life, and it never occurred to me that people ate them.
I love them. Well, you're thinking about the steps of the public library.
But I might try that.
I love them. I love pigeon.
I might try that. Now, is that a reasonable gourmet
Absolutely.
order?
And when I go to a restaurant, I try to find something that didn't have to be put out of a tin or sliced from something that was bought. I like to find something the chef himself has made. And so consequently, I think tonight I'll have the crepes Laurent.
And where would you go from there?
I would try the Côte de Veau or Sept, just to see how well it's a veal chop, to see how well it's cooked, and it's with French mushrooms, to see what quality veal is used in this restaurant, and so on.
What kinds of things are you looking at in a first-class
You look at everything. You look at the tablecloth as to whether it's clean. You look at the glassware as to the crystal. You look at the way that cigarettes ashtrays are cleaned. You look at the flowers. You look at the carpets. You see. You look at the people.
Well, would you have a certain feeling before you ever look at a menu?
The people don't believe this, but I think that when you look at a restaurant, quite often, before you order, you more or less know what the food is going to taste like before you get it. In New York. Yeah.
Is New York special?
I mean, your kidneys are going to be, the veal kidneys that you order are going to be a little bit on the overcooked side. The mushrooms, the London broil, God forbid. It's going to have a very thick mushroom sauce on it. It's, you have to scrape it off before you get to the... there's lots you can tell about a restaurant just by looking at the menu, by looking at the carpet, by looking at the whatever. You see if the plates are hot, which this one is. It's quite important for hot dishes to have a hot plate. And you would be curious in this dish to see whether or not the crepe is tender, as to whether or not the sauce is made, if it's made with a hollandaise, if it's starting to curdle a little bit for one reason or another, if it's made with a mornay, which is a cheese glaze, as to whether or not it's too thick with flour. There's so many things one wonders about. And the filling as to whether if it's a crepe with crab meat, you wonder whether or not some of the pieces of crab are still left in. So shall we? It's very good. How's that?
When you're out with friends and you're trying to get a report on a restaurant, do you trade bites? Would you like to try a snail?
Right here. May I swap you?
That's all.
Is it good?
Tastes very good.
Nice
So
curry.
is that gauche, if you're out socially with two couples, to trade a bite back and forth?
If I were at the Prime Minister's home, I mean, I would think it was terrible. I mean, it would be quite gauche. But in a restaurant, this is my kingdom, my table, and I would try to make it as unobvious as possible.
You can do it. The chef would not be offended. How important is service?
Service is tremendously important in any great restaurant, and that is the anticipation, the knowing what a customer wants before the customer knows himself. And this is quite possible. For example, if a lady has a cigarette to be lit, she's not aware of having the cigarette in her hand, but the maître d'hôtel is aware of that she's got it, and so the moment she puts it to her lips, she shouldn't have to fumble for a moment for a match.
Pigeon, would you like to
No, thanks. I wish you would. Is that a reasonable request
To have your pigeon carved?
Yes.
I should say it is. I happen to be, I'm one of those people, you know, who likes to become involved both by the way of taste and by the way of involvement with food. And there are a lot of people who like that. They like to carve their own pigeons, as they like to carve their own lobster and to cut up their own fish.
Well, is it wrong if you don't want to say no?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I do think in the long run it's more elegant to eat it carved for you. One thing that should be done in restaurants is after the wine is ordered, if it's a red wine, it should be opened immediately because it should breathe. And in the home too, you know, if you're serving either a Burgundy or a Bordeaux or a red wine, it should be open and left at room temperature for at least an hour or 2 hours before you serve it. There are many people I know who have a terrible misconception, and I know this, restaurateurs have told me this, that Americans will come to the restaurant and they'll order a bottle of red wine and ask them to chill it. And this is unforgivable, I mean, to me. It just shouldn't happen. That looks absolutely beautiful. That's my favorite. I think that perhaps squab is my favorite. Squab or pigeon, as it is in the menu. Is perhaps, will you take it? Is perhaps my favorite poultry on earth. I think outside of game birds, it's the most elegant dish one can have.
Not raised, though, really, is it? The people
I
raised
suspect,
it?
yes, they are. Sure, I'm sure this is not a. It's not a game bird.
They didn't shoot this on
this was raised
steps of the New York Public
Library. It was raised
Library.
on a poultry farm, right? You know that New York State has the finest veal, I suppose, in all of the United States.
No, I didn't know that.
Right?
I would have thought Iowa.
No, because they pamper the veal in New York. The calves are raised in very special circumstances, and they are slaughtered when they're quite young. You see, the texture of this veal is quite white. It's much whiter than one gets in, say outside Manhattan, in the supermarkets. And on top of it, Sept, which is a very special kind of French mushroom. It's quite meaty, and I like it.
The story will continue after this.
Some people are confused by style. What about restaurants where they put on a show, like serving half the menu on a flaming sword?
Terrible. Do you know what happens? The food is cooked in the kitchen. It takes time to get that food onto the sword. They put a piece of cotton gauze on. They douse it with alcohol. They bring it to the dining room. And by that time, the food is stone cold, and they get $1 extra because they lit a match. The same thing is true of almost all flaming dishes. I mean, I can do without them forever because to bring them into the dining room to flame only gives the restaurateur a chance to add 25 cents, 50 cents, $1, and on up.